Good morning, everyone. Good to see everyone. We have the opportunity, the privilege to study Parshat Beshalach together. I hope everyone's doing well, and we are looking forward to jump in. We left our heroes on the precipice of redemption as the Jews were getting ready to leave Egypt. And Beshalach is a Parsha that is jam-packed with so much to cover. Both the Jews leaving Egypt, the splitting of the sea, Az Yashir, the singing of the Song of the Sea, the beginning of the journeys into the desert, which don't end up as glorious as the Jewish people has hoped, the complaint to Moshe about the man, or the complaint to Moshe, the receiving of the man, the Slav, the rules for the man, Shabbos, challenges in Refidim, and then ultimately the battle with Amalek, or the initial encounter with Amalek. We get introduced to Yoshua, sort of foreshadowing the future leadership of the Jewish people. Moshe's hands are raised up to the heavens, and we get the eternal battle with Amalek, with evil that we are charged with, that continues to animate the Jewish people for generations to come. There's a ton to look at in Parshat Beshalach. And we are going to scratch the surface of the first few lines, because that's what we have the time for. That's what we have the opportunity to study. So let's dive in. Again, our focus in this class, at least at this juncture, is to try to dig beneath the surface, to look at some of the text and the commentaries and try to understand a little bit deeper than the broad sweep of things. So let's start right at the beginning. We are in Beshalach. That is Shemot 13, Parak Yud Gimel, and begins Pasuk Yud Zayin, verse 17. Vayhi Beshalach Paro et ha'am, and it was when Paro sent the people. Lo nacham Elokim, and God did not lead, nacham, relent, derech eretz plishtim, the way of the path of the Plishtim, of the land of Plishtim, ki karovu, because it was close. Ki amar Elokim pen yinachem ha'am b'ratam melchama v'shava mitzrayma, because the Lord said that maybe the nation will see battle. They'll see some sort of war, and they will return to Egypt. Vayasev Elokim at Am Derech Hamidbar Yam Suf. So God led the people the way of Yam Suf, the way of the desert, of the sea of reeds. V'chamushim alu b'nei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim, and the Jewish people leave armed, or chamushim. They leave stocked from Egypt. And then the rest goes on. Moses took Yosef's bones. They went here, they went there. God traveled, blah, blah, blah. But that's the heading. These two verses are the heading. These two verses is where I want for us to consider this morning, to explore and understand better. So, but tell me just, I tried to translate it as linearly as possible, but tell me, so what happens? The Jewish people leave. Paro sends the Jewish people out. In parentheses, we should ask, what did Paro think when he was sending the Jewish people out? How long are they going for?
3 days into the desert.
Right. So does Paro think that they're being sent for 3 days? Does Paro think that they are being sent forever? Right? Does Paro think that he sent them out for good? What makes you think that it's only 3 days, Lee?
Because that was always what the arrangement was, and was never any statement to the contrary.
So it was definitely talked about that would be the point of it for a certain point. Is there ever a statement to the contrary that is
I guess if you say the tone of being thrust out rather than being, given a 3-day weekend pass.
Right. And also after the Makkah of darkness, right? Or in the beginning, in the ninth Makkah. So we are told you won't ever see. Paros told Moshe, we're not gonna ever see you again, right? This is it. You're done. We're done. This conversation is done. Um, and sort of the things change, right? There's going to be this terrible cry, and they're going to let the Jewish people go, and everyone will be okay. So it's possible it changes, right? Forward thinking, right? The rest of the story, Egypt gives chase to the Jewish people. So at least someone thought the Jewish people. We have to ask ourselves, why are they giving chase, right? Is it because they thought they should come back, right? 3 days passed. It doesn't say, it was 3 days, and Paro then realizes it's not coming back. There are questions here about why are they giving chase, right? Is it because they thought they were going for 3 days and it was for longer? Is Kibarach Ha'am, right? Just skipping a little ahead. In verse 14, I'm sorry, in parak 14, in parak Yud Daled, right? It's not exactly clear that they think that they ran away or that they should be coming back. V'amar Parlo of Israel, that Par will say the Jewish people, Nivuchim hem ba'aretz sagar lehem midbar. They are sort of lost in the desert. They are stuck in the wilderness, right? That doesn't make it sound like that they ran away. But then in verse 5, and that just 2 verses later, the people.
What chapter?
14. Sorry, 14. I just read you verse 3 and 14.
14
and verse 5 and 14.
Yes.
So it's not exactly clear, right? Does Paro think that they ran away? Does Paro think that they are trapped and therefore they're good to be recaptured, but not necessarily that they should have been captured, that they should have been come back? And there are others who will say barach doesn't mean run away, but it means some sort of being lost. I think it's not exactly clear, but that's a whole other discussion. So the Jewish people get sent out from Egypt, and then they have to choose what direction they're going to go to, right? Clearly, they're eventually going to Israel, or maybe not, right? Where are they going from Egypt? What's their destination?
Sinai.
Lee says Sinai. Some might say it should be Israel, right? And Sinai is along the way, but right. Again, let's just go back. We're 13, chapter 13, verse 17 and verse 18. That God didn't take them derech eretz plishtim. What's the way of the land of the plishtim, right? By the way, it's very apropos to what we're talking about. Where did the plishtim live in ancient Israel?
What's nowadays Gaza?
What is the Riviera of the Middle East?
In 17, when Hashem seems to say, Hashem said that people may, have a change of heart or something like that. Who was he talking to? It sounds almost like he was thinking out loud. He certainly wasn't talking to the people.
Yeah,
You're right.
I had a corollary question about the same thing, Rabbi, if I may. Rambam's 10th principle is that God is omniscient. So again, can we really take that literally, or do we, what do we do with that?
Which part?
That the people may change their minds. If God is omniscient, then it would be problematic to take that particular part of the pasuk literally.
You didn't say that people are. God was right? Don't the people say more than once in the desert, right? Let's go back to Egypt.
Yeah, but they're not at war with anybody yet.
God was worried that the war would do it. It ultimately be even less than that.
So who's God talking to here? That was my question.
I think that's to
Most-
us, right? And the question then is, what are we to learn from it, right? What are we to learn from it? Because it's not to the people. But this leads to a question like, what exactly is going on here? What are we supposed to understand? What are some of the options? God didn't take us the way of the Plishtim, but took us through the wilderness route, right? For what reason? And even reading the verse, right? Ki Amar, because they're worried. I'm sorry, Ki Karofu, because it was close. Ki Amar, because there was going to be battle. Which one is it? It's because it's close, right? Is it that it's too short, right? Is God looking for the scenic route with the people? And if so, why? Or is it that there's going to be war, right? There seems the verse itself, as complicated as we're trying to just dissect of who it's talking about, who's it talking to, it even gives us two answers, right? God didn't take us the way of the Plishtim, but Ki Karovhu, because it was close, Ki Amar Okim, because there might be war, and they'll go back to Egypt. Which one is it?
Well,
I'll ask you another question. Who's the war with that we're worried about?
The police team.
The police team. In that case, the police team.
All right. Are there other options?
Bnei Israel could go west instead of going east.
No, I'm saying, are there other options of who the war could be with?
I could be with Mitzrayim.
Egyptians, right? And another option could be the Canaanites, right? The people they're going to capture there. So that's another question that we sort of have to figure out. Har Sinai got mentioned. Like, is Har Sinai not the goal here? Another interesting question to sort of raise, which we'll come back to, is the Plishtim that we're talking about in Gaza aren't the Plishtim, don't live there yet, right? They come much later, right? The Plishtim don't arrive on the shores of, or the Philistines that we typically think about, who live Gaza, that area, Ashkelon,
The
Ashdod,
5 cities.
Gaza. They don't come till the 12th century. So we have some time before that. Now, we do know that there are Plishtim in Israel. They might be more in the Negev, in the south, right? And because Avram and Yitzchak live with them, right? So it's interesting, like what exactly, just from a Waze perspective, a Google Maps perspective, what is Derech Plishtim? We're assuming it's sort of the coastal road, but it could also just mean up the Sinai into southern Israel. Ki Karofu, because it is close. What's close?
Going the route along the coast.
What I'm saying, close to what?
They go along the coast, it would get them to what becomes Eretz Yisrael.
So the issue, Ki Karofu, the issue is that it's too short of a route. We want the scenic route.
I don't read it that way. I read it that in spite of it being the short route, he's taking him the long way around. So the Israelites.
So you're saying another question. How do we read those keys? You're saying read the verse. God didn't take them the Plishtim route. Key, despite it being close.
Right.
Key, because. So you have two words in the same verse that mean oppositional things. Which is possible. It's definitely possible.
Well, Rabbi, it could be, I mean, the because could be a reason for considering that route. You know,
Meaning, God didn't take them the Plishtim route. And why would you think they took them the Plishtim route?
because it's near.
Because it was close. And then back to the big sentence, because it was blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
I actually didn't see that in any of the commentaries directly, but that is a much more elegant way of then sort of having to say despite, which some of the commentaries do say. That is an excellent insight. And that might just be I didn't read the commentaries close enough, but that is an excellent insight, which I have not seen. There are people who are going to say despite, but yours is sort of, maybe that's what they mean by despite, but that's a really eloquent and elegant way of reading that. What else could be Kikaro because it's close? Maybe that's close to Egypt, right? Kikarofu, it's close to Egypt. That they might see battle. We've already said that could be with the Plishtim or whatever, and then they'll want to go back to Egypt. And because it's so close, it'll be easy to go back to Egypt, as opposed to if they approach Israel from, the west, or they approach Israel from the east, going west, that they'll be able to approach that.
I'm not picturing Kurov just being close. I'm picturing, to either the starting point or the destination. I'm looking at Google Maps. Well, not literally, but thinking about Google Maps and basically taking the shortest path between the 2 points. That's the way I interpret the Karov.
Right. My point is, yeah. So, and then the battle, Kikarovu, it's so close to the destination, you're saying because it's the shortest point. All right, we'll get to that. That could also go be. And then the other question is, what is Chamushim in? So let's look at some approaches to this. All right. So let's start with the last point that we just made. Chuck, what you just said. Kikarovu meaning, this will be the point of departure. Kikarovu meaning the shortest route, right? The shortest route. Suggests, this is the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer in the Mechilta. This is the opinion of the Ramban, Rav Sadia Gaon, Rav Hirsch, the Malbim. This is also the opinion of the more contemporary Kasudo, who is a professor in the forerunner to what is the Hebrew University. And Rav David Tzvi Hoffman, who was 18th, 19th century Wissenschaft thinker in Germany, I believe. And basically, their premise is that the wilderness route, the roundabout route, the more circuitous route, was not the default alternative to a rejected route, but rather the value, the importance in it was because in its own right, it was Derech Hamidbar, the way of the desert, and it offered the opportunities to the nation to grow as a nation, right? That there was this preparation, this maturation period that needed to happen, which fits nicely with the idea of Sfirat Omer, of needing to grow to Matan Torah, all of the different pieces that we talk about that the Jewish people had to develop and mature, that this works very nicely. And that could either be physical and mental fortitude or spiritual development, right? You could see them as two sides of the same coin. The Meshech Chachma, the Nitziv see this as spiritual development, right? Whereas others see this as physical development. And let's break this down a little bit. So what exactly? Vayhi Beshalach Paro et ha'am. This approach simply understands that Paro freed the Jews permanently, right? That there was a change at some point. And the goal, the destination of Yam Suf, of the drowning of the Egyptians, was not a necessary prerequisite before receiving the Torah, before going into Israel, or it was not inevitable. It ends up happening. Paro makes bad choices, but it didn't have to happen, right? And the reason why I lay that out is we will see some commentaries say no. The goal of Derech Hamidbar was to set up Yam Suf. The whole goal of this is to drown the Egyptian army. According to this approach, that's not inevitable. That's what happens. Paro makes bad choices, but it's not inevitable. What's the goal? Why are we doing this? Kikarofu, because it's too close, meaning we want to be drawn out. We want the Jewish people to grapple with questions that are beyond just, getting to their destination. The journey is really important. And that's what happens. V'lo nacham Elokim ki karofu. These commentaries assume that the issue is the shortness, meaning don't read karov as close, read karov as short, right? And if the Jewish people almost immediately left Egypt, ended up in Israel, and needed to then battle to capture the land of Israel, they wouldn't either be spiritually, mentally, or physically prepared for that. Ki amar, for God said, Penilachem ha'am v'ratam melchama v'shavu Mitzrayim, that they're going to see battle and they're not going to be ready. Who's that battle with?
That would be with the Egyptians.
No,
No, the police team.
or the Plishtim or the Canaanites, meaning whoever they're going to battle with in Israel. Meaning ki karovu, it's too short. Because by the time they get there and they see battle, they won't be ready for battle mentally, physically. They won't be ready for battle spiritually. And then they'll flee back to Egypt. Right?
Yeah, but Rabbi,
Yeah.
it seems that approach is still assuming that the destination that they're heading for is Israel.
100%.
Whereas we know from the very beginning of Shemot that the goal would be to worship Hashem on Mount Sinai. I mean, that's what God tells Moshe is going to be the sign of them having been redeemed.
You just won't let me finish the presentation. No, you're totally right. This is a challenge. Let's get to that. But what Lee is highlighting is, don't we know that when at the burning bush, God tells Moshe, what's the first stop? Maybe even the destination of the people when they leave Egypt? Tavdu et halukim ala ha'arazeh. Serve this God on this mountain, i.e., receive the Torah. So this is very nice that this is the case, but first of all, Lee, the answer can be the Matan Torah. But let's come back to that in a second. Let's put some other pieces together, but let's see what that is. By the way, again, another piece, the end of the verse 18, Vachamushim, the Jewish people leave armed for battle, says the Shadal, Rav, I'm blanking on his name right now. Or Shmuel David Luzato, that's exactly what the verse means, that they left armed. They left armed to highlight the point that it wasn't a lack of weaponry. They weren't able to do battle with the Egyptians. I'm sorry, with the Canaanites or the Philistines. It was that they didn't have the courage, the physical, mental, or spiritual fortitude to do battle. And that's what this longer process has to be. And by the way, it fits very nicely with what ultimately ends up happening. The sin of the spies, where the Jewish people show that they're not ready to go into Israel. What's their punishment?
Another 40 years.
They have to take the longer journey in the desert. Meaning, God's initial contention is, we need to give them more time to prepare. We're not going to take the shortest route. We're going to take the middle route, right? And then in a year, the people are about to enter the land and they're not ready. And so the punishment, and this sees less of punishment and more as a cause and effect. God's not punishing the people just to punish and be vindictive. But when the people demonstrate that they don't possess the adequate or the requisite courage to conquer the land, the spiritual commitment to the Almighty to go into the land of Israel, their unpreparedness is met with a need to postpone the entry into the land of Israel, and they detour until they're ready, until they build that up, right? It's not so, don't read the sin of the spies and the punishment of the spies as just God being vindictive. It is a natural consequence of not being ready, and the education plan is then you need more time in the desert to get ready, right? So it actually fits nicely later on. Now, let's go back to Lee's point. Lee says, well, what about receiving the Torah? That's a really important piece. So first of all, who knows where Har Sinai is? Maybe it was on the Karov path also. And maybe it would have been boom, boom, boom. Pesach, receive the Torah, go to battle, no problem. Rav David Tzvi Hoffman writes in his commentary that there's nothing unique about Har Sinai. That's the whole point. And if God wanted to travel that way, maybe there would have been another Har Sinai, right? Maybe Har Sinai is only chosen because it's on the wilderness route. But it doesn't mean Tabjunat Halokim Allah Harazeh, serve God that's on this mountain, meaning serve the God that's on this mountain. Meaning, is Moshe highlighting where Har Sinai is supposed to be, or is Moshe highlighting in that moment to serve God that's on this mountain? And maybe even Har Sinai could have been in Israel. Who knows?
Interesting.
How do you, Lee? Do you buy that?
Yeah, I can buy that.
Very good. And by the way, all the miracles in the desert, the man, the splitting of the sea, the water, all the commandments, the desert being a more sterile, secluded, insular environment, all provides the best experience for the people to grow in resilience, to grow in their spiritual belief and their spiritual commitment and their connection to God. Others might say that that Lee, just to answer your question, you could answer that and just say all of this was exactly the point, meaning receiving the Torah in the desert is exactly the point of not going straight into Israel. Receiving the Torah is one of the experiences that will grow the people in the desert over the years. That will give them the resilience to be able to go in. That's exactly the point. Ki karovu, that because it's close, meaning it's so close that they won't have the time to receive the Torah. It's so close they won't have the time to watch the miracle of splitting the sea. It's so close they won't have the time to experience the man. Meaning the fact that we're taking the longer route gives the opportunity for all these things to happen. That is one group of commentaries. Let's see another group of commentaries. The next group of commentaries is focused on the destruction of the Egyptians. And this is primarily the position of Rav Yosef Bechor Shor, who lives in the 12th century in northern France, and the Sforno, Rav Ovadia Sforno, who lives in the 15th century, end of the 15th century, right? 1400s to the beginning of the 16th century in, I believe, northern Italy, or Italy, or mid-Italy. And the Sforno says, I'll read it to you inside. The Sforno says, Vayhi Beshalach Paro, Lo Nacham Elokim Derech Eretz Plishtim, Af Alpi, even though Shakavana Elokit, the divine plan, Haita Leholich et Yisrael Lahar Sinai Lekabel Torah Umisham Le'Eretz Yisrael. Even though the destination, the goal was to go to Sinai and then to go to the land of Israel, as he quotes whatever Mikomakom Hakavana Ata, the first waypoint, the first stop, Haita Laholich Cham LeYam Suf, to bring them to Yam Suf, Asher Lo Haya Derech LeEchad Mi'ela, which is not on the way to either of these destinations, Kidei Lahat Bia Sham et Paro Vechelo, so that they would sink, they would drown Paro and Paro's army. V'hine haderech hayashar v'akatzar lalechet mimitzrayim leyam suf he haya derech plishtim, and the shortest way that to get to the Yam Suf was the way of the Plishtim. Amar Ha'el Yitbarach, God said, Lo rotzeh lin chotam ba'oto derech. I don't want them to go in that way. Ki karofu, because it's too close. Mipnei shahaya oto haderech sofo karov lemitzrayim. Because that that area is close, not short, but close to Egypt. And what would happen when the people see this, again, this key being ki karov, ki amar. It's the same reason, right? It's too close to Egypt. And when they see war with Egypt, when Egypt comes to chase them, which is the whole point of the first stop, so that the Egyptians get drowned in the desert, they're going to be afraid and they're going to be able to run back to Egypt, Kikarovu, because it's so close to Egypt. So what happens? God takes them to the desert to go to the other part of Yam Suf, continues the Sforno, Ki ba'oto aderech lo yavo megidim mi Mitzrayim. They're not going to come close with people that tell from Egypt. V'lo yadu b'ridifut paro ad shehesig otam. And they're not going to hear about Paro. There's no Instagram. There's no X, right? They're not going to know that Paro's coming to get them until they're trapped between Paro and the sea, which is what the Torah tests, right? What are they worried about? That if Paro sets out, someone's going to hear, and then when the people still have a chance, if they go and it's so close to Yam Suf, to Egypt, they'll be able to sink back to Egypt. God wants it to be that there won't be a moment when they can head back to Egypt. They won't know that Egypt is there until the final moment when Egypt is closing in. Right? There's no GPS tracker on Paro's cavalry. They won't know that that's what happens. That's what the Bechor Shor, that's what the Sforno suggests. So again, this changes. Was the splitting of the sea and the drowning of the Egyptians preordained? Absolutely, right? That is the whole point here. Lo nacham elokim ki karofu, says the Sforno. The whole consideration here is to get to the Yam Suf. And we don't want the Jewish people to be there so quickly because that route is too close to Egypt. And they're going to hear about the war and they're going to come back. So we're going to take the longer of the two, even though the goal is that. So who's the Berata Melchama? Says the Sforno. Is sea battle with Egypt. Sea battle with Egypt. How does this roundabout route give the solution? The roundabout route was to avoid a confrontation with the Egyptian enemy in a way that would enable the people to flee. We didn't want them to flee. So we want to wait until it's too late to flee. That's the main point of the Sforno. And what's Derech Hamidbar Yam Suf? The chosen way, the wilderness is not important because it's a wilderness, as opposed to what we just saw before. The wilderness is the fertile ground for the Jewish people to grow and develop and gain strength and confidence and reliance on God. No, the main point is Derech Hamidbar Yam Suf, to get you to Yam Suf. The raison d'etre, the whole point of this part was to get the people to the sea in a way that the Egyptians would chase them. What about Har Sinai? No one's forgetting about Har Sinai. Har Sinai is always in the cards. It's just the next stop. All right. That's a second option. So we have two categories here, and they have very different ways of reading the commentaries, reading the words. Let's get to one last one, and then we'll end with this. This is Rashi. Finally, Rashi. If those have Rashi, you can follow along inside. Rashi suggests the very simple explanation. The choice of the roundabout wilderness midbar route was a response to the dangers lurking on the Plishtim road. And Hashem was worried, God was worried, lest the war with the nation that they encounter along the way frighten them to go back to Egypt. Right? That's it. That's what's going on here. Vayhi Beshalach, Vayhi v'lo nacham, Nihang Kimo la lach na nachet am. No, that's not what I want. Kikarofu v'noach lashuv oto haderach l'Mitzrayim. What do we worry about? Not that it's short, but it's close. It's close to Egypt. It's easy for them to get back to Egypt. Baratam Chama, when they'll see battle, who's the battle with? Whoever they might encounter, Amalek or the Knaanim. V'im halchu b'derech yashar, and if it was an easy short route that was straight, hayu chozrim, they would go back. V'im keshehekifu derech me'ukab, and if they go a way that is crooked, that is all roundabout. So, it's almost like you take someone, you spin them around and you tell them to go back where they came, right? They're not going to be able to. So if it's not such an easy way, they won't be able to. They won't be able to. Pen Yinachem, Yichshavu, Machshava, Al Shiyatsu, V'yitain Lev Lashuv. So it's all about it's all about being afraid that will give them too easy a chance for them to go back. Not that the path will grow them. It's not that necessarily, this is an intentional excursion that will build them up, but just a reality, practicality that we don't want them being able to go back. How do we understand V'lo nacham ki karov? Right? It was either this was too close to Egypt, either despite this fact or because of this fact, it gets rejected, right? We're worried that they're going to run back. Who are they going to see war with? Well, it's a whole bunch it could be anyone. It could be the Plishtim, it could be the Egyptians, it could be others. Vishavu Mitzrayim. God's worried that they're going to return to Egypt. We know this is the case, by the way, right? That people say that even without this, they still say that. All the more so, it was easy if they had breadcrumbs to follow to get back. How do we read just very practically the double verse? So Rashi and the Ibn Ezra imply that it means because God is thus giving two reasons why to not go through the Derech Plishtim, the Plishtim way. One, because of fear of war, and the other because of proximity. The fear of war was significant, specifically because it was so close to Egypt, and because it was so close to Egypt, there was a fear of encountering war on the way would push people to go back to Egypt, right? The Ibn Ezra quotes another opinion, which is the even though opinion. I'll just read it to you inside. Amar Rav Moshe, he's quoting Rav Moshe, which is Rav Moshe ibn. I'll tell you who he is in a second. Rav Moshe ben Shmuel Cohen, often referred to Rav Moshe bar Shmuel Cohen ibn Gekatla, who lived in the late 11th century. He lived in Cordova and some other places as well. He's a grammarian. We won't hold that against him. So Amar Rav Moshe ki karofu af al pi shehu karov, even though it's close, despite it's close, ukamo lefi dati ki am kishorafu, whatever. That's what he says, meaning ki atam lama lo nacham derech el pishtim bavorshu karov. Why didn't? And by the way, actually, Lee, I'm reading it now. It does read a little bit the way you read it. Ki hatam lama lo nacham derech eretz plishtim. Why didn't God take us the way of the plishtim? Ba'avor shehaya karov, because it was close. V'hine nacham derech rehuka. God took us the long way. V'hine lo ra'u milchama. so that they won't see war and they won't need to go back. Meaning, even though it's close, we're trying to avoid the war, and that's what it is. So that's what the Ibn Ezra quotes here as well. And by the way, that's why, let's just read one more point into it. At the very end of this point, we're told, verse 18, V'chamushim alu b'nei Yisrael mi Eretz Mitzrayim, the people leave stocked or armed. So if this is about doing battle, and we're worried that they're not mentally, physically prepared. So even though they're practically prepared, but they don't have the mental, physical, or spiritual capacity. So that's why it's telling us that they're armed. Even though they're armed, they're not really ready to fight. According to this approach, it doesn't mean that they're armed. It actually means, Rashi says, that it is that they were chamushim, and chamushim ella. Hold on. That they were armed. So that's not what I'm looking for. Davar acher. No, that's not it either.
She means stocked.
Hold on a second. Says Rashi, what does it mean that they were that they were no, that means arms. So who says that? Sorry. I can't find who said it right now. No, that's Clay Zion. But I remember reading one commentary who said, right, that only 1 in 5 left Egypt. But that's not what I'm. Oh, sorry. This is the Ibn Ezra. The Ibn Ezra says, "V'chamushim." What does chamushim mean? Shehem haya lahem kol tzarcham. They have food. They were stocked. Meaning, why do they need to be stocked? Because they're taking the longer route. Because they don't want to go the closer route. It's going to take them longer because they don't want to go to battle. But if I'm taking the circuitous route, I'm taking the scenic route. You got to make sure you're packing enough snacks. Otherwise, people are going to get cranky in the car, right? So chamushim doesn't mean armed, meaning to tell you that even though they have arms, they're still not ready for battle. Says Ibn Ezra, no, it means that they're stocked. That as a result of the fact that God decided to take them in a different route, even though against the closer one, they had enough provisions to be able to last. And unfortunately, the Jewish people do get cranky when the provisions run out, right?
Yeah.
Cranky is the understatement of the end of our Parsha, right? Now, there are some who try to conflate these things. The Ralbag, Josephus famously tries to conflate these and basically say these are multiple reasons, right? They don't want to have battle with the Philistines, but there's also, it's not just that God did one for one reason, and these actually fit nicely. The Abarbanel, the Akedat Yitzchak, Rav Yitzchak HaRama suggests, no, we don't go the quicker route, because we don't want to get into battle and they're going to run back. But also the longer route has intrinsic value as well because we can grow and develop along the way. The journey is really important as well. So you really have both that get presented here as well. So let's wrap this up. So we've seen a couple of different approaches here. We've seen either what's going on here is we're just trying to facilitate the destruction of the Egyptians. We want to get to the sea, and we want to get to the sea in a way that the people won't know that the Egyptians are coming, to make sure that there's no chance that they run back, right? Others suggest, no, this is about affording a time. It's a national retreat. The longer journey helps us build up our mental, physical, and spiritual capacities. And if you take too short a road, you're not going to be able to get there. And part of that is even all the experiences that happen in the desert, all the miracles, all the experiences, Har Sinai, and everything. Others suggest, no, this is just about avoiding the Philistines, the route that causes danger, and that's what we're worried about, not about the long journey. And there are others who suggest it's a combination. How does this matter? How does this manifest? Well, what was the point of what who are we afraid? Bratam milchama. What war we're going to see? Is that the Plishtim? Is that the Egyptians? Is that some other war? Is that they're afraid of future wars? Who knows? That's the debate here. Kikarovu. Does that mean it's too close to Egypt? Does that mean it's too close to Canaan? It'll take them very short. Or does it mean that it is too straight to get back to Egypt? And what's the problem? It's too easy to return to Egypt, or there's danger from the Plishtim, or there's danger from the Canaanites, or that it's too short of a transition. All of those are sort of open for debate here, will lead to very different ways of reading them. So we'll stop here, and we'll have to continue with the Parsha next year, with the next 2 verses of the Parsha.
Very nice,
Okay.
thank you.
All right, everyone.
Just one quick question. Could
Yeah, sure.
the war that is being referred to here, I understand it could be anyone, but maybe this was the war with Amalek that God knew was going to happen. He wanted to make sure that they wouldn't, go back to Egypt because of it.
Now, it can be anyone in that not every opinion agrees that anyone is appropriate one for it. There are opinions that will tell you it's not Amalek because this is about closeness to Egypt. Others will say, no, Amalek is exactly what we're worried about. It depends which person is which, right? If you see this as not being scared back to go to Egypt, so then, yeah, exactly. This is with Amalek. This is with anyone.
Okay, thank you.
Very nice.
Thank you, Rabbi.
No problem. We'll speak to you all later.
Look like.
Thank you.